showed me a vision of him on the cross, his crucifixion, and I knew so clearly when he showed that to me that if he could do that for me, that he only meant good for me, despite the pain, despite the trauma. He had my good intentions for me in my heart.
Welcome to Voices of Conversion. I am your host, Addie Ray. Welcome back to this week's episode. Today, I am so excited to bring you a new guest, a person that I have been admiring on social media through her sharing her own conversion and reversion story on her Instagram page. We connected through there, and I am so excited to have this conversation with her today. Welcome to Abbey Lisieux. Welcome onto the Voices of Conversion podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy and blessed to be here.
Oh, I just love that we connected through the platform that I got started on, Instagram, and I have been following your content on my personal page since you started your account and just been just so awestruck by just the grace that you carry yourself with and your vulnerability in sharing your own faith journey when I myself, and this is the sixth episode of the podcast, I have reiterated time and time again, I am not ready to share my own conversion story. And yet, God has put me in this position. I feel very blessed and very unworthy to be interviewing wonderful women. So far, it's been only women guests, but wonderful women, and hopefully soon men of the faith that have converted. And so I am just so happy that you were here today. And yeah, I'm just overjoyed.
I am the same way. So happy to be here.
Let's get started talking about your life before your conversion and eventual reversion. What was life like for you as a child and adolescence?
Yeah, so I grew up in a big family, a big Lutheran family. I am one of 10 children, and I grew up Lutheran, like I said. My father was actually a Lutheran pastor, so I was full in pastor's daughter life. And so I've always known at least an idea of who God was. And that's where it all started for me. And my family converted to Catholicism when I was 9 years old. So that's when I was first introduced to the one true faith. That being said, with that exposure I grew up in a very dark time in my childhood, a very broken home where abuse and substance use was very prevalent. And so even though I was exposed to Christianity and then eventually Catholicism, I was never exposed to the truth and the goodness and the beauty of the faith, and not experiencing what it's truly like to have faith, that personal relationship with Jesus. And so, walking in my life, in my childhood, experiencing those difficult things and experiences, God was just nothing that was very personal to me. And I knew He was there and I knew He was real, but didn't have Him truly in my heart and didn't experience that relationship with Him. And so I would say the beginning, my experience was that I walked life very lost and very broken, and really struggled feeling like I didn't belong to anyone or anywhere. And so, yeah, that's kind of my background of where things started.
That's a very difficult place to come from, of that. And I don't want to speak any ill of your family at all, but that facade of being in ministry, regardless of your denomination, is that there is a facade that you have like a closer like being a pastor's daughter, it's like, oh, well, people might have thought, oh, they have like a closer relationship with God, or they're, and a lot of times, or that facade of holiness. And a lot of times that is a very lonely and isolating place to be. I could imagine having that basically like you're the pastor's daughter, nobody, knows what you're going through at home or otherwise. What was that like for you? Were you isolated in your childhood?
Yes, very much so. And I grew up, pastor's daughter, and we were homeschooled. And so between those two things, like very much a very sheltered upbringing, and wasn't exposed to hardly anyone that was healthy or truly living out the gospel. And so that was really difficult because my experience with faith, religion, was really clouded by these people that my family members, where I should have received love and safety from, and a good example of living out the gospel, but experienced quite the opposite. And so that definitely has affected my faith journey, where it started off really negative because I associated the faith with these people that were doing very destructive things to me and to those around me. And so it left me feeling really confused because I would hear all these beautiful things about the faith and God's love for us, but paired with what I experienced as a child, and young adult, and with the people that, posed as good Christians, it was very opposite to those beliefs. And so it left me feeling pretty lost and confused.
Yes, and I could definitely see where it would be like that for you, especially as a child. It's so hard to hear that because I went through something very similar myself. I'm also a former homeschool kid, and I'm also a convert from Lutheranism. So that's something maybe we could talk about after the podcast, because this isn't about me. This is your story, and I want to talk about your story. But it seems that we have quite a bit in common. So from there, that loneliness and that isolation that you experienced at home and through being homeschooled and in that environment with that, by definition, hypocrisy, where did that lead you spiritually? And a follow up on that is when your family converted to Catholicism, did they change their behavior? Uh, did they have a change of heart in how the home life was? And if so, what did that look like?
I would say that truly, as much as it breaks my heart to say, I would say it got significantly worse. I mean, as the years went on, substance abuse and, I mean, all sorts of abuse just snowballed and got worse. And it wasn't talked about in my family at all. It was very much swept under the rug. And so growing up around that, it was very normalized. Like the abuse was normalized. And it caused, I would say, like I mentioned earlier, just a lot of confusion.
Mhm.
And even like as I grew older and started to have like my own thoughts and my own voice, it definitely affected my view of God and of Mary and of the faith in general. And I definitely like started to really just go through the motions of our faith and was very lukewarm because of that.
That's a very difficult place to be, especially when you are seeing the hypocrisy firsthand and it getting worse, after your family converting to the faith, and that does affect your image of, especially if it's, and I don't want to push too much on the home situation because I know it's, you know a sensitive topic, but if there's abuse by your mother, right? That can affect your relationship, your spiritual relationship with Our Lady. And kind of an inverse of that, healing that mother wound, at least in my case, having that devotion to Our Lady has healed that mother wound when, experiencing abuse at the hands of people that were supposed to not cause you physical harm and they cause you physical harm. It does kind of taint that view of even the word mom. And even now as being called mom or my kids call me mama, it's I have had to confront those in myself, those wounds, and Our Lady can heal that. But when it's yeah, when you're just not in that place, when you're a child, it does distort that relationship with Jesus and Our Lady. And I just can't imagine going through that because, yeah, having your family convert to the fullness of the faith, but not truly convert in their heart through their actions don't reflect that. That's a really hard place to be. That's a hard place to be in. So from there, as a child, you're isolated. It kind of goes from bad to worse. You mentioned sweeping things under the rug, which
Mhm.
happens a lot, and so that continuing to happen. You're an adolescent, so you said you were 9 years old when your parents converted. Did your dad leave his job as a pastor, and then you all just kind of started living this Catholic life? And then kind of after that point, where did you kind of go into in your teenage years,
My
spiritually and emotionally?
my teenage years are when I think truly the Lord really started to stir things in my heart, and um, life at home had gotten significantly worse when my mother miscarried my youngest brother, John Paul, and it really shook our entire family. Um, I remember experiencing that grief and almost being surprised by how difficult that loss was for me. Losing someone that I didn't even truly know, but felt brought to my core. And my mother seeped into a very deep depression. And um, at this point, my older three siblings no longer lived at home. And so I was the oldest sibling at home, and my mother was unable to care for any of us anymore. And my father was very hands off um, for all of my life. And so, without a parent to step in, it left things to me. And so, I actually didn't take any high school classes because I had to take care of my family and step in where no one else could or would. And so I took over a role of taking care of all the cooking and the cleaning and care of my siblings and parenting. And so that, I mean, further made things difficult with my relationship with my parents because not only did I experience abuse, but I experienced neglect and I experienced having to grow up way too fast and being put in a role that I shouldn't have been put in, but was necessary for my younger siblings to have what they needed. And so I definitely feel like the Lord started to stir in my heart, and I was not open to Him being there, but I definitely can look back and see where He was starting to like truly start to work on my heart and try to be present for me in that suffering. Um, and so I think that's really where things started to grow as a teen.
And so how did God work in your heart? You mentioned uniting your sufferings to Jesus, and that's a beautiful thing with our Catholic faith. One of my favorite things is that we in our sufferings, they never go to waste if we unite them to Jesus, and God can use those sufferings for the salvation of souls. Tell me how that was going for you spiritually at the time, how Christ worked in your heart for you to offer up your suffering.
Well, I felt so incredibly close to my baby brother that had passed, and it made heaven feel so much more real for me, knowing that he was there and looking over us. And it brought comfort to me knowing that he was with Jesus and praying for me, interceding for me. And so that made heaven seem so much more real than it ever had for me before. And, and I would say otherwise, just feeling the Father's presence more so in my life. And it was more, I would say, just quiet stirrings of my heart.
You helped raise and essentially raised your younger siblings from a certain point and took that burden on, which no child should have to take that on. You took on that burden and didn't take high school classes due to being homeschooled, but it wasn't really a homeschool type situation at all. They called it homeschool, but it really wasn't a solid education. When you graduated, or did you graduate? Did you like officially have a graduation? All of that. What was life like for you? Like then, tell me about it.
So, so once I turned 18, my mother agreed to allow me to go to college. And I think her motivation was for me to find a husband, and which is funny in hindsight. And so I applied to some colleges, and like we were able to work through the paperwork and whatnot and get accepted. And yeah, so I attended college, did really well despite my circumstances, God bless. And so I did leave the home at 18. And yeah, that was really healthy for me to be able to have that freedom that I didn't have because of my responsibilities. And it was difficult to leave that role and worry about my younger siblings, but I think it was necessary because it did push my mother to finally step back into that role where she was necessary to be. So it was healthy for all involved. And
I asked you about high school graduation. You shook your head no. Did that not happen?
not at all. And yeah, it's funny how that worked out because my mom told me that she handled all the paperwork, and being a homeschool, very naive girl, like child. I mean, I was 18, but I was a child. Like
Right.
I was none the wiser to whatever she did, but I guess she had made up some sort of transcript to get me to college, and I had no idea. I had no clue, and I didn't find out until years later. And it's just kind of a funny part of my story because I don't have a legitimate high school education or not even a GED, but I have like a college degree.
Wow.
Just kind of a goofy, and I laugh about it now because it's just what else would you do but laugh about it? But
Right.
yeah, it's just a funny gap in my education.
Yeah, that is a hard place to be though, to have to catch up in college,
Absolutely.
from the lack of education in high school. Um, yeah, I definitely know where you're coming from on that. So, in college, how was your faith life? How did you stepping out of that maternal role? I'm sure you still had those maternal feelings for your younger siblings, but stepping out of that direct maternal care role and stepping into formal education really for the first time in probably a very long time, if not your whole life. Um, how was that transition and how did your faith play a part in that period?
I would say I was pretty rocked leaving the home and experiencing something completely different. I was I mean, for the first time in my life, really, I was on my own and I was exposed to all sorts of new things, all sorts of new people that I wasn't used to, being so sheltered growing up and in a bubble somewhat. And so that was definitely very difficult for me, especially. So I went to culinary school, and culinary school definitely brings around a very colorful set of people. And so, between growing up homeschooled, very naive, and my personality, which is definitely more timid and shy, and I feel like I've grown out of that and become a lot more like my true bubbly self since then. But walking into that, I was so timid, so shy, really struggled with people pleasing and being a doormat. And so that was really difficult experience for me in navigating that and trying to do well in school and having the structure of school for the first time in my life. And so that was really hard. And I would say, as far as my faith, it was, I mean, I went to mass on Sundays, but I remember feeling like I didn't belong there because I felt like I didn't have that true faith. I didn't accept Jesus into my heart. And so, in some ways, I felt like I didn't belong because it felt like a lie. Like I'm showing up to mass every Sunday, and in general eyes, I look like, the typical good Catholic girl doing what she should, go to mass on Sundays, but not really living the faith as I should, not welcoming the Lord into my heart. And so it really, truly, those years of my life were very lukewarm for my faith.
That's something that I'm really glad that you mentioned, inviting Jesus into your heart. Because when we're talking to especially our evangelical and Protestant brothers and sisters, is they always talk about inviting Jesus into your heart, and that's how you get saved. And I remember I accepted Jesus into my heart as a 8-year-old, and I did it as a performative act. I didn't actually know what I was doing at the time, but I just knew you had to do it. And it wasn't really much later till I was 15 years old till I actually did accept Jesus into my heart. But that's something I really am glad you mentioned, because I want our Protestant brothers and sisters to know that, yes, as Catholics, we do that too. You don't just stop having a personal relationship with Jesus because you become a Catholic. If anything, you have a more personal relationship with Jesus because you're a Catholic, because we not only accept him into our heart, but we literally consume him in the Eucharist. Like, he literally dwells within us. Um, and we do take that literally. Like, we are like vessels. We are vessels for Christ, and quite literally when we receive him in the Eucharist. But like you're saying, if your heart's not there, if you're going through the motions of the sacraments, going through the motion, even, and I catch myself, I have the attention span of a butterfly. Father Donald Calloway talks about that. Like, we're like butterflies, like with our attention spans. And when he said that, I was listening to a talk of his. When he said that, I identify with that so much. So even in mass, I catch myself with my mind wandering and trying to genuinely maintain a state of prayer throughout the entirety of it, and it's very difficult. Oddly enough, my kids actually help me focus more. Neither here nor there. But anyways, so if your heart isn't there, if you haven't accepted Jesus into your heart, even if you're going to mass and obeying all of the rules, doing the things you should do, like you said, like in appearance wise, looking like you're being a good Catholic, but your heart just isn't there yet. That's not where we wanna be spiritually. That's not a full relationship with Jesus. That's not the goal. That's not the finish line. When you were doing that, when you were going to mass and you just didn't accept him into your heart, what were you feeling? What were you thinking? Where were you spiritually in that time? And how did your faith kind of continue through that period of culinary school?
I think I just was walking in my brokenness and acting out through my brokenness. Like all these wounds from my childhood that I hadn't addressed. I was living in a way that you could so clearly see how wounded I was. And for me, that ended up really showing up in my relationships and the kind of men that I would be attracted to, the kind of men that I ended up in relationships with. And it just further led me to more brokenness because of the men I was dating and the brokenness I experienced from even experiencing abuse in those relationships and walking through that season of being lukewarm and then experiencing more abuse and more just unhealthy behavior from these men led me so much further from the Father's heart because I just clammed up in my brokenness. And it really, because I felt like I couldn't trust, I had never been able to trust a good, healthy man because I didn't have good, healthy men in my life. I, not with my father and not with my brothers and not with these men I dated. And so it made it really difficult for me to even have a desire to seek out the Father's heart and allow Him inside of mine because I was afraid. I was living in fear that if I was vulnerable enough to allow Him in my heart, that He would betray me and hurt me as soon as I was vulnerable, just like with these other men in my life. And so I would say that is the main thing that kept me from having faith of my own and truly accepting Christ was those wounds from my father and from those unhealthy men in my life.
And those wounds run deep. And it can be a situation where an individual experiences woundedness from their childhood and they think, okay, well, like I'm doing all the things right. It should be healed by now. And it's just not. And it shows up in relationships and it shows up in your self image and it shows up in these places over and over again. And until we get to that root cause of why those wounds are there and healing them, and ultimately that healing does come through Jesus Christ, we just it just keeps it's like a reoccurring trauma almost.
Mm.
You're almost reliving that abuse from your childhood and the adult relationships, and I have lived that. It's a really bad place to be because you haven't healed that childhood wound and you just keep seeking out bad because it's all you know and
Yeah.
it's all you've ever known. Um, and that's just, yeah, I think a lot of women can relate to this. A lot of men too. I mean, people overlook that men can be victims as well. So a lot of men and women listening to this, I'm sure, can relate to this situation that you were in. So you have these wounds, and that really inhibits your relationship with God the Father, with Jesus, and with Our Lady. How do you receive healing in those wounds? How does Christ come into your life? What was that moment for you? And how ultimately did you receive healing, or are you still actively working on healing those wounds?
Oh, he is still working on me every day, every moment of every day. He is working on me. Um, which I am so grateful for. But I would say the moment. The last unhealthy relationship that I entered into was actually that with my ex husband. And I would say this is a relationship where I experienced the most woundedness in my life. And I I experienced I experienced a unplanned pregnancy with my son Lewis, God bless him, and going through that, and we got married in the Catholic Church 6 weeks after I found out I was pregnant with him, and I thought I was doing the right thing, but was acting out of fear and woundedness, and then experiencing a very traumatic pregnancy and birth and postpartum, and then walking through all of what happened during that time in my life, in that relationship, in my marriage, and everything experienced as a first time mother. And my faith continued. Not only did it continue to be lukewarm, but it actually reached a point where I left the faith. And it was because I was so wounded by everything happening to me. I associated the faith with all this brokenness. Like, I thought to myself, even though I believe like God is real, I never stopped believing that the Catholic Church was the one true faith. All of the teachings all made sense to me. What tore me away from the faith was that I was so wounded by people that were also Catholic, also Christian, and that woundedness is what made me leave. And I just rejected it because I was so broken. Felt so broken, and I felt abandoned by God. Even though he never abandoned me, I just felt abandoned by him. And I didn't understand how he could put me through the trauma of my childhood, and then the trauma of those relationships, and the trauma of my marriage and an unplanned pregnancy, and because of the safety issues with my family, like, I had stepped away from my family. And so I went through all of this with no friends, no community, no church, no family. And so I went through all of that alone. And that's when I, yeah, rejected the faith and left the church. And I came back more so out of care for my son when he was born, because I knew it was important for him to be baptized. Thank the Lord. And so I came back and started attending again for his sake, but still was living very lukewarm. And I had accepted God enough to attend Mass again for the sake of my child, but not enough to open myself to Him. And so, walking through that, the moment when I finally did allow Him in was when things in my marriage had gotten to the point where I was being advised by multiple priests that I needed to step away. I stepped away, and I found out within days that I was pregnant with my daughter. And I experienced the darkest moment of my entire life. I didn't understand why. I cried out to God angrily. This is the first time in my life that I had been truly angry with Him and expressed that anger. And I just cried out to Him. I was like, how could you put me through this traumatic childhood, this traumatic relationships, this traumatic marriage, and um, now becoming a single mother? My son was only not even 13 months old at the time, and then experiencing now another pregnancy, unplanned pregnancy. And so I cried out to him, just so angry and hurt and confused. And it was the first time I had actually talked to him in I don't know how long. And in those moments, he showed me a vision of him on the cross, his crucifixion. And I knew so clearly when he showed that to me that if he could do that for me, that he only meant good for me, despite the pain, despite the trauma. He had my good intentions for me in my heart always. And I knew, despite how hard this was, that I could trust him. I could let him in. And I won't say that it was immediate that that trust happened. It was something that has grown over time and continues to grow. But I would say that was the moment that I laid bare my heart to him and let him reside. And I'm so incredibly grateful for everything I've been through because it led to that moment. And I would go through all of that 1,000 plus more times if it meant the ending of getting to know him truly and experiencing his abundant love and mercy for me, because nothing I've ever been through or will ever go through will ever compare to the joy and peace of that reality. And it just makes me smile every time because I just adore him, and I'm just filled with so much gratefulness. I'm so grateful that he has blessed me abundantly and continued to pursue me despite me pushing him, despite my anger towards him, despite just the amount of brokenness that I have. And none of that matters to him because none of my brokenness in his eyes affects my worth, um, or his love for me. And so that was the moment that I truly let him in. And that was a few years ago now. And it's just been a journey ever since of continuing to choose to allow him in. It's a daily choice to lay open my heart and allow him in and allow him to heal and allow him to do good. And it's transformed my life completely.
That is so inspiring and miraculous to receive a vision of Jesus on the cross. Was that a vision out of, like the book of Acts describes, I believe it's St. Peter getting a vision from God that all food is clean for us to eat, so there's no more clean or unclean food. And yeah, it was St. Peter, I believe, describes it as a sheet falling down from the sky and you're kind of looking through a sheet. It's the vision that he had in the book of Acts. Was it like that, or did you have a dream? How did this vision happen?
I would say it continued to show up every time I prayed and I'd close my eyes, and it was so clear. Like it felt like I was there. And it wasn't just that one time. Like it happened, I would say multiple times over the course of those first few weeks, is that every time actually prayed, closed my eyes and cried and begged him to give me answers and support. And yeah, it felt like I was right there with him, like I could reach out and touch him. And when I imagine that and was seeing that, like, where I felt in that was just at the foot of the cross at his feet and just thrown down in front of him, like, out of love and just surrender.
That is an incredible grace to be able to receive that. I do believe this, and I don't know what the church teaching is on it, but I'm pretty sure this is sound doctrine. I'm gonna double check myself, but I think it is that the Lord gives us the graces that we need to convert. And so those of us that have these amazing, radical moments of visions and miracles that just pull us out of that darkness. It's because we need that. Like I always said when I first converted, I was like, I am so thick-headed and so stubborn, and I hated Catholics so much that God needed to literally like hit me with a metaphorical like two by four to get me to realize this is the truth. Follow me. And that grace of is getting to see our Lord pouring himself out of love for humanity, but for you. Like he loves his whole creation so much that he loves each of us individually infinitely. And that's a love that we can't comprehend. But that's such a beautiful thing that he showed that to you. And your life, like you got this vision multiple times in prayer, and that is just a beautiful grace. Um, what happened in your faith life following these visions of our Lord?
I threw myself in. I went full in. I started attending mass as often as I could. I sought out the sacrament of confession and just started receiving the sacraments regularly again, getting involved in my parish and meeting other people of the faith. Started like asking the Lord for that community and seeing Him bless that request and just started to be vulnerable with people with what I was going through. And God just blessed us abundantly with everything we needed. Experiencing that pregnancy alone and going through the divorce process. And so, yeah, he's shown up in such crazy, big, abundant ways for us and we've never wanted for anything because of him. And very blessed to be in a church community, the same community that I joined then, I'm still in now, and they still continue to bless us so much. And truly, they're our family and care for us passionately so much. And so it's been beautiful to experience God's love and provision through those people and through the community and through really solid priests that have loved us so well and protected us so well. And so that's been such a blessing.
That is an abundance of blessings to have that village be in your parish community and have priests that are like fathers. Like oh my goodness, there's so much healing that can come from a positive interaction with a clergy member, especially if you come from a background of having that woundedness from childhood of, not never being good enough or never, that relationship, that counsel, that protection that you can receive through wonderful, holy, and godly people in the church community. And there is just such a wonderful healing there of having this priest that, you've been blessed to have in your life to heal those wounds from years before and come in as protectors.
It's been, I would say, healthy, holy priests have played one of the biggest roles in my healing journey to just feel the Father's love for me through them and thus that healthy, pure love and protection to experience for the first time in my life men that wanted to love and serve and protect for no reason other than because it's what was right. And not because of anything I had to do to earn it or be worthy of it. Just being a daughter of God made me worthy of that. And so experiencing that care really was has been so influential in my healing journey and still continues to be, and the community as a whole stepping in for me as a single mom and the difficult things that I navigate because of that. And they just continue to show up for us in any way that we need. And it's been something I don't take for granted because I know it's not the case for everyone. And it's been such a blessing to know I can go to Mass every week and know that there's at least one, but usually multiple smiling faces for us and people that are willing to be generous and supportive in every way that we need. And that's been a huge part of my healing journey is to experience that pure love and service from those that are in the church, and it just inspires me to be that for other people in the community as well, to yeah, just to partake in the body of Christ and to bless each other in those ways.
Wow. Well, I feel so just overjoyed hearing you talk about the healing and the community that you've been blessed to be surrounded by. When I see your content on Instagram, I think, how does she do it? Because we have the same number of kids. And, mine are a little younger, but it's just, I don't know how you do it. I really don't know how you do it. Um, and so, yeah, I'm just so overjoyed to hear that you do have a good community around you because being a single mother is no joke from the single mothers that I do know. And you're doing 2 jobs. You're really doing, like, 4 jobs, but you're doing the mom and the dad job and having to provide. How has the Lord provided for you in this season?
Um, that has been it's been a journey, and it's really truly been a lesson for me to continue to learn. I'm still on the journey of allowing him to provide how he sees fit and not how I necessarily ask for his provision. And that's been really beautiful. And I've learned a lot of humility along the way, necessary humility. Um, you mentioned earlier being stubborn, and I can definitely relate to that. Um, and so it's been beautiful to just learn how to surrender that to Him, to not only surrender my wounds to Him for Him to heal and to bring good out of, but also with our finances, with my parenting, navigating parenting as a single mom and not having that masculine role in our home that's so necessary for a healthy family unit, and being in a phase of life where we don't have that. And and so it's been beautiful just to see him provide, not how I necessarily ask, but what he knows is best and what we need. And I think our church community has played such a huge role in that. But I would say the most help I have received as a single mother has been through the intercession of St. Joseph. He has fiercely protected us, provided for us. He has navigating raising a son when I am a woman and going through a journey of trying to be in tune with my femininity, but navigating that and trying to show my son how to be a masculine, faithful man that he so desperately needs, but I can't provide, has been such a beautiful thing to experience through the gift of St. Joseph because he has stepped in that role. And relying on him and his intercession has just been a very large added element of healing and support.
Saint Joseph is a wonderful saint. He's the terror of demons. He's the foster father of Jesus. There's the consecration to Saint Joseph that Father Donald Calloway, who I mentioned earlier, he wrote that book, and that consecration is a powerful one. Have you been able to do that?
I'm actually doing that this month. So if it's been on any listener's heart to start, it starts September 30th, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm really excited and looking forward to that.
Oh my goodness. I might actually do that alongside you
You should.
because that is, yeah, it's a wonderful book. And I've started the consecration, and then, like a lot of these things, you get the spiritual attacks, like they could show up in forms of like crises in life. So I've had to stop it twice.
I've
But
experienced similar, so you're not alone in that.
yes, I completed the consecration to Our Lady through 33 days of morning glory on Our Lady of Guadalupe's feast day several years ago. And I bought the book because I borrowed it from a friend originally. And I bought the book for the consecration to Our Lady. And so my husband and I are planning on doing that together because we had both done it separately before we met each other. But we both want to also consecrate ourselves to Saint Joseph. And so I'm going to tell him after our podcast this evening that we can start on September 30th because we have the books. So
Yes. God bless that. Yeah, he he's a force, but he's so tender. And that's what has drawn me into asking for his intercession and for his saintly friendship is just that tenderness. And yeah, he's in images all over my home now. And I just when I'm having a tough time with anything, but especially in my parenting, I definitely lean on him quite a lot.
that's wonderful. And for the listener that is not Catholic, when we say consecrating ourselves to Our Lady and consecrating ourselves to Saint Joseph, that does not mean that we are bypassing Jesus. The full title of that is consecration to Jesus through Saint Joseph. So through the intercessory prayer of Saint Joseph, we are giving ourselves, giving our heart, giving our lives back to Jesus. And it's a beautiful thing. If you're not Catholic, you can still consecrate yourself to St. Joseph and Our Lady. I'd love for you to be Catholic. I believe it's the fullness of truth. But even if you're not, it's a wonderful thing to practice. It's a series of prayers. In my experience with consecrating myself to Jesus through Mary, it was 33 days of very intense prayer and fasting and um, going to Mass, and just the most consecrating myself to Our Lady was the most spiritually rewarding um, experience outside of my receiving the sacraments and my wedding day and receiving the sacrament of marriage. Consecrating myself to Jesus through Mary was such a powerful experience. And so I highly recommend consecrations to Jesus through Mary and through Saint Joseph. So I'm excited for you to start that journey at the end of September. And I will probably be joining you on that one.
So exciting. I love that.
Yes, we'll have to keep, on Instagram, I'll post in the stories for any listeners that wanna start that with us. I'll tag you in it if you wanna, maybe keep it going publicly, although I know prayer life is a very personal matter, but I definitely think that especially in the time today is the day after, Charlie Kirk got shot and killed while he was speaking in Utah. We need people devoted to Christ. We need people praying for a change of heart of this country and this world. And so I think there's nothing better we could do than consecrate ourselves to Jesus through Saint Joseph right now. So I'm really glad you brought that up, especially with the just the dark times we're in this world.
Yeah, his intercession for more strong masculine men like Charlie to help lead us. We need that.
Yes. Yes. And whether you liked what Charlie said politically or not, violence is never the answer if you disagree with someone. I personally think that he was a champion for the unborn, which in my political worldview, that's the only issue I vote on. If you aren't pro-life, I'm not voting for you. Plain and simple. I will pay 100% tax bracket if you are going to say babies in the womb. Okay, I will pay for universal health care. I will, like I will buy into any environmental policy that you see fit. But if you are not pro-life from conception to natural death, I am not voting for you. And Charlie Kirk was a champion of the pro-life cause.
Was
And so we mourn his death and we pray for the repose of his soul. And we pray that our country and our world would be healed and that strong men would continue to rise up and not be scared about what happened yesterday, that they would,
be courageous.
yes, that was the word I was thinking of. Yes.
Courage. We need those courageous men.
Yes. And part of those courageous men is that I also have a son too. And like you said, Saint Joseph is an integral part in your motherhood. And those strong men can rise up that are grown men now, or they can be our sons that we're raising. So, yeah, I just,
Mhm.
I'm very pro the intercession of Saint Joseph, and I think this is the time for that.
It is. I think you are so right about that. It really is the time.
Yes. So, what is life like for you now? Now that you have opened your heart to Christ, invited Him in your life, I've seen the beautiful journey you lead on social media. You're inspiration to me. You're inspiration to so many thousands and thousands of women that follow you. But what is life like for Happy Lisieux day in and day out? What is your walk with Christ like, and how do you see your life going forward?
Right now, it's just learning to continue to surrender to His will, His timing, and I think the main thing that I have that's been on my heart so much this year, especially, and even in the last couple of months, particularly, has been my daughterhood, resting in my daughterhood, in my worth. It's been a journey, like to learn what true femininity is, to rest in my true femininity, and to grow my relationship with our Lord, to grow in my relationship with our Blessed Mother, um, through the saints that have shown up for me as friends to draw me near to Christ's heart, and ultimately as um, with my vocation as a mother to pour that into my children and to raise them to know and love our faith, and especially going through everything that we've gone through and the wounds that unfortunately that they have experienced as well. As a mother, I just want to shield them from every hurt, and to realize that I can't and that's out of my control, and to surrender that to our Lord and our Blessed Mother, and to allow Him to use those things, those wounds, those hardships to be a part of their story, because that's something I remind myself of so often is I am who I am today because of what I've been through. I have Jesus in my life because of what I've been through. And that's something that I should not take from my children. They deserve that too. And their stories are unique to them the way the Lord is going to call them to Him and to call them to preach the gospel. And with Lewis being almost 4 now, I'm really starting to see that in him, and to see the kind of person that God has created him to be, the role that the Lord has for him in this life. And it's been truly beautiful to see that. And I, as much as I, as a mother, want to take away any pain, to see that comforts me and gives me hope and more faith, because it's truly beautiful to see how the Lord's using his beautiful little tender heart. He is one of the most tender people I have ever met. His capacity for love, it just astounds me. And and not only to give as a mother, but also to receive the love that I see through my children. Um, and I didn't touch too much on the Blessed Mother tonight, but a huge part of my openness to Our Lady has actually come through my son, and his adoration for her has actually inspired me to get to know her better and to love her better. And that's through his toddler years, which is just incredible. And I think that's just been where life is now, is just learning the Lord more and really experiencing his abundant love and mercy and the goodness of this life. And it can be really hard, especially after the Minneapolis shooting, which is 15 minutes from our home, and just the all the acts of gun violence and violence in general that have happened very recently, which have shaken me pretty hard. And I think my biggest takeaway is that yes, these things shake us and they're difficult, but suffering is good and it draws us near to him. And I feel called to say, like, the Lord still is loving in abundance. He's still providing in abundance. We have the fullness of our faith, and despite these tragic things and suffering, we still have one thing, and that's his love for us. And that's all we truly need to get through anything, any kind of suffering. And so that's brought me so much comfort and so much hope in these tragic losses and experiences, especially those that have been near our home. And so yeah, that's just life for us, is navigating all of that and trusting and pouring out love where he tells us to pour out love, and it's been really beautiful.
That is really beautiful. Thank you for sharing where you are at in your life now, and it really has inspired me, and I know it will inspire our listeners. I have one last question for you before we close out for tonight, and then I'll also ask where people can find you. But my last question is, if you could talk to yourself at your lowest point and you could give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
You are worthy. You are loved. Allow him in.
That is very wonderful and prophetic, I would say. All right. And where can our guests find you?
I'm on Instagram and my handle is Abbey Lisieux.
Wonderful. And Abby's content on Instagram has inspired me, and the way that romanticize your everyday life. Like everything is so beautiful.
Thank you.
Um, and the way that you honor God through the smallest of things. It's just very inspiring for me, like when I make my kids breakfast, I'm like, "Okay, guys, scrambled eggs, you know, it's organic. Okay, we're good, sausage, we're gonna make it, guys." But it's like, I mean, like the way that you like even prepare like dishes and just everything is just so beautiful and just like it's inspired me and my mother to be like, "I need to try harder." Abby's doing a lot. Like,
That's so kind. Thank you.
yes, you're an inspiration to a lot of moms, and, I just love your content, and it is so uplifting to the soul just to have a spot on the internet where it's not filled with hatred, there's no, controversy, it's a wholesome Catholic space where we're all striving for the same thing, which is heaven.
Absolutely.
And I feel like this conversation has brought us closer to that end goal. The end goal is to be with Jesus for eternity, and that is what we need to be doing, through every part of our life, through all of our actions, and you really do show that how to pursue Jesus through even making a meal for your kids, or getting dressed for in the morning, honoring Christ through everything that we do, and it has inspired me. So thank you so much for being a guest on my small but growing podcast.
Such
It's
an
just so
honor.
humbling for me.
Truly.
Thank you.
Such an honor for me. I was so happy to be here tonight.
Oh, wonderful. And yeah, just thank you again. And yeah, I'm just very thankful for this conversation. And I know that our guests are very, very happy and encouraged and brought closer to Christ. That's my prayer, that they're brought closer to Christ through listening to this conversation tonight. All right, until we see you next time on Voices of Conversion, stay close to Christ, and I will see you soon. Bye.